The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
Over 15,000 people have died in total following a catastrophic earthquake in the Turkish-Syria border region. Georgia has contributed with its lifeguard forces to help deal with the disaster. American legal company Ackerman signed a contract worth USD 917,000 with Giuli Alassania, the mother of the ex-president of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili, in August 2022. The document prepared by Ackerman was published on the Foreign Agents Registration Act FARA website on February the 3rd. FARA is a United States law that imposes public disclosure obligations on persons representing foreign interests. It requires foreign agents defined as individuals or entities engaged in domestic lobbying or advocacy for foreign governments, organizations, or persons. International School of Economics at TSU, ISET, published the Khachapuri Index. The new year started with a historic high for the Khachapuri Index. The index continued its upward trend, reaching an average cost of 5.77 gel in January 2022. This is 1.8% higher than December 2021 and 23.7% higher compared to January 2021. The highest price increase was observed for eggs, 47%, and flour, 31%. Furthermore, the year-on-year price of Khachapuri ingredients, butter, 23%, cheese, 16%, yeast, 15%, and milk, 10%, each rose in comparison to January 2021. Oil extraction in Georgia hit a record high since 2015. According to the data of the Georgian Oil and Gas Corporation, GOGC, 39.1 thousand tons of commodity oil were extracted in Georgia last year. In 2021, this figure amounted to 35.3 thousand tons. In 2009 to 2022, 2009 was distinguished by oil extraction when its volume totaled 57.6 thousand tons. This is The Checkpoints. I'm Elena Gvangilashvili, author and the host of this show, and the Checkpoints team is ready to give you an update on the main business and economics issues. Today, we have a big exclusive that you will be able to watch right after the Checkpoints ends. Michael Honigstein is the political and economic counselor at the U.S. Embassy in Tbilisi, Georgia. On his last tour, he was detailed to the U.S. military as a political advisor for the U.S. Africa Command based in Stuttgart, Germany. Before that, he was the head of Embassy Kabul's internal politics unit. Previous tours include political chief at the U.S. Embassy in Colombo, which covers both Sri Lanka and the Maldives, and the head of the Human Rights Unit in the International Organizations Bureau, which was responsible for overseeing implementation of U.S. policy for the UN Human Rights Council and other multilateral human rights bodies. Michael has also worked as the Peace Process Officer in Israel, Darfur Desk Officer in Washington, Political Officer in Sudan and South Sudan, opening the consulate now and embassy, Consular Officer in the Bahamas, and Political Officer and General Services Officer for Gabon and Sao Tome and Principe. Michael has received over a dozen individual and group meritorious and superior honor awards, the Joint Meritorious Civilian Service Award for the Office of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the State Department's 2014 Democracy and Human Rights Achievement Award, and the 2015 Palmer Award for the Advancement of Democracy from the American Foreign Service Association. Now, briefly, some main numbers in the USA-Georgia economic relations. The United States of America is among the top 5 largest trading partners of the country and ranks 5th with a 6.3% share. According to official statistics, during 2022, Georgia-USA trade turnover amounted to USD 1,206 million. Trade between the countries increased by 43.1% compared to the same period in 2021 and hit a rate high in the last decade. 78% accounts for imports from the total trade turnover with the USA, while 22% for exports. This year, Georgia spent USD 941.3 million to buy goods in America. The increase compared to the previous year amounted to 45.2%. The share of light vehicles took the largest part in the imports, 88.5%. Top 5 importing commodities: cars, meat and poultry products, other goods, used clothes and products, and transmitting radio telephone equipment. As for exports, in 2022, the country earned USD 265 million from the sale of goods in the USA. The increase compared to 2021 was 36.2%. Top 5 exporting commodities: ferroalloys, diodes, transistors and similar semiconductor devices, natural grape wines, fruit and vegetable juices, and pipes, tubes and hollow profiles, seamless made of black metal. Exclusive interview with Michael Honigstein will run right after the checkpoint ends. Before that, let us check out what the week in economic news and outlooks looked like for Georgia.
Irakli Garibashvili, Prime Minister of Georgia, held and led a meeting of Economic Council at the government administration. It was noted that a double-digit economic growth has been witnessed for the second year in a row in Georgia. After a 10.5% growth rate in 2021, the trend has been maintained in 2022 at 10.1%, which has been resulting from the right policies pursued by the government of Georgia. Members of the Economic Council also discussed the ways to reduce inflation. It was noted that the annual inflation indicator declined to 9.4% in January 2023, and it's expected to see a further reduction of the indicator. Discussion also touched upon the sovereign credit rating of the country announced by the international rating agency, the Fitch. It upgraded the sovereign credit rating from stable to positive. Members of the Economic Council reviewed the large economic projects which are being developed by the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development under the instructions of the Prime Minister of Georgia. In December 2022, the construction cost index increased by 2.2% compared to the previous month. The change was mainly due to a 10.6% increase in average monthly nominal wages of the employees in the construction sector, which contributed to 2.44 percentage points to the total index change, according to the preliminary data from the National Statistics Office of Georgia. As of the document, compared to February 2023, the construction cost index increased by 11.5%. The latter was largely caused by the 28.8% increase in average monthly nominal wages of the employees in the construction sector, which contributed 5.87 percentage points to the total index change. Georgia's state-owned investment fund, known as the Partnership Fund, will change its name into the Georgian Development Fund. The government has already submitted the relevant bill to the parliament. At present, the Partnership Fund does not include any enterprises. In January 2023, Georgian Railway left the fund. In addition, the Oil and Gas Corporation was withdrawn from the fund from late 2022. Following the rebranding, the state-owned fund will have an independent board of trustees comprised of professional members instead of state officials. The government of Georgia plans to change the name of Partnership Fund from 2021. The first announcement about this was made by the then Minister of Economy Natia Turnava in November 2021. According to the management report of the fund, the organization plans to invest $100 million in the commercial attractive projects in several sectors. The Prime Minister of Georgia, Irakli Garibashvili, urged the oil importers at the government meeting to lower the prices to a reasonable level. As Irakli Garibashvili pointed out, the profit from 1 liter of petrol can be almost $1. According to the Prime Minister, there are very high margins and oil importers still get high profits, which is unacceptable. I would like to appeal to the ministers to call the oil importers and lower the prices to a reasonable level. The profit from 1 liter of petrol can be almost 1 lari. It's necessary to regulate this matter in the shortest possible time, the Prime Minister says. He deeply believes that importers will consider the situation of the people and reduce the price. Oil extraction in Georgia hit a record high since 2015. According to the data of the Georgian Oil and Gas Corporation, 39.1 thousand tons of commodity oil were extracted in Georgia last year. In 2021, this figure amounted to 35.3 thousand tons. Of the extracted oil, investor share made up 22.6 thousand tons, while the state's 70.04 thousand tons. The state usually sells its share of oil at the auction. Georgian light and Georgian heavy oil are extracted in Georgia. 2009 was distinguished by oil extraction when its volume totaled to 57.6 thousand tons. The amendments were introduced to the organic law on the National Bank of Georgia, ensuring yet another position in the top management, the first vice president to become the acting president in case of absence of the latter, and thus eliminating the legal gap in the law. The draft law, submitted in an expedient manner, was approved with 83 votes. Currently, the bank has 3 vice presidents. One of the vice presidents becomes the acting president in a case of absence of the MBG governor. And thus, the organic law leaves the vagueness to specify which vice president becomes the acting. The amendment is necessary to eliminate any theoretical vagueness and ensure the due functioning of the National Bank as the constitutional body. Georgian Railway hit a record high profit of 283 million lari in 2022, with the annual growth of this freight marking a 22% increase. Director General David Peradze told Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili on Friday. At the meeting, Peradze noted the company was currently capable of carrying 27 million tons of freight per year, adding the figure would reach 48 million after the completion of its modernization project by the end of 2024. The officials also discussed Baku-Tbilisi Kars Railway project, which facilitates the transport of passengers and goods between Azerbaijan, Georgia and Turkey, and noted the road was expected to become fully operational next year, with 87% of the project completed at this stage. Plans for 2023 also include reforming the railway transport sector of Georgia in a bid to make it more competitive and bring in compliance with the European standards, the meeting noted.
Business exclusive of the week is our interview with Pankaj Birla, Area Vice President in Eastern Europe at Marriott Hotel Holding. Offering the most powerful portfolio in the industry, our Marriott's 30 brands and 8,000 plus properties across 139 countries and territories give people more ways to connect, experience, and expand their world. Georgia has also benefited from Marriott's presence here and the top-notch experience that it offers to visitors, making Georgia even more appealing for business and tourist visits. Georgi Sakadze sat down with Pankaj Birla to talk about doing business in Georgia and the plans for the future.
Thank you so much for your time.
It's wonderful. Anytime, Georgi.
Yes, but at the same time, you're quite often here.
Yeah, I'm here 3-4 times a year, 3 times a year at least.
What the purpose of this particular visit, or it's in an ordinary way?
You know, I do regular operations visits to my properties to come and meet with our general managers, to meet with our local owners, and most importantly, to connect with our wonderful associates and see how things are going and get a pulse of the business.
Vice President of Marriott International Change should be aware that your local team here is one of the best.
Thank you very much, Georgi. That's very kind of you.
That's my personal and professional word, so you should be proud of them. Marriott's been in Georgia since 1997, and especially this hotel, it's 2004, the end of 2003.
It was a former Majestic Hotel,
Majestic.
1914.
Taking into consideration, Marriott has been one of the oldest investor partner company of this country. I can see that Marriott was growing its own chain as well here together with Georgia.
Absolutely.
Tell me about the first steps and then about the entire portfolio for 2023.
You know, for us, Georgia has been a wonderful story. When we opened Marriott back in 2004, who would have said in a country with 4.5 million inhabitants, we will have today 8 hotels that are open and another 4 in pipeline that we are going to be opening in the next couple of years. We are the leading operator now.
We're talking only about Georgia now.
Only Georgia. Only Georgia. Between Batumi and Tbilisi. And we see a great opportunity to start growing in the regions, whether it be Kakheti, whether it be up in the mountains. Georgia is a land of opportunity for us.
You're also been covering regional-wise as well.
Yes.
And we had a chance to talk through Forbes and Marriott channels about the possibilities of the entire region, and we have some difficult situation within the region. Is not the best, but at the same time, everything is growing. My next question before we move to the region is, during your current visit in Georgia, meeting with your local associates, staff, team members, and investors, what are the feelings about Georgia?
Very upbeat, optimistic. You know, again, numbers speak louder than words. If you look at how we ended last year and how we started January, and when we look at the forward-looking pace, it's all very encouraging. Nothing indicates otherwise. And I feel that same level of optimism when I meet with our investors and our associates and our general manager alike. So it's very inspiring for me as a leader to come here and spend time and just see positive energy around you.
We spoke about the current existing portfolio, about your plans. Do you see some intent from your existing partners and investors that you will definitely grow in the following years?
Absolutely. I can tell you, for example, our owner of Marriott, he's also Courtyard and Moxy, and we ongoing have discussions about how do we work together to grow further. Our owner who owns the Paragraph in Sheketvilli is now opening. So all our owners are multiple unit owners. You know, the Sheraton Tbilisi is single unit owner, but he's also a multiple unit owner because he owns properties in Middle East with us. So one of the things that differentiate Marriott is our owners really believe in us, they trust us, and we are able to do multiple units with them. And that's what we like.
And all of them intends to grow together with you.
Those are the indications we have today, and I don't think so. Nothing is going to change.
Let's broaden the picture, Mr. Vice President, a bit. I'm talking about the region itself. You are covering Eastern Europe.
Yes.
And you are covering the broader region as well. Tell me about the situation within the region on behalf of Marriott. international?
Well, I cover again Eastern Europe, and it's just encouraging in terms of demand patterns that we are seeing, in terms of optimism that is there. You know, whether it be Central Eastern Europe like Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland. You know, those are. It's very encouraging. Whether you see it in Caucasus, you know, we have very good presence in Georgia. We are growing in Azerbaijan. We are growing in Armenia. We have strong presence in Kazakhstan. We are looking to grow in Uzbekistan. So, you know, we understand CIS countries very well, and we know what it takes to grow in this part of the world. And all the trends indicate that the future is bright.
I am so much happy that Georgia, among the counted countries, is one of the leaders in growing and presence and occupation.
Absolutely. Georgia is such a wonderful story. You know, here's a country of 4.5 million, but you get 9 million tourists, which is amazing. You know, and I wish we had more countries who had such a wonderful success story.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Georgi. Always a pleasure to speak to you.
Till the next.
Till next time.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.
It's high time to see how the rest of the business week looked in main news and outlooks. Our reporter Natia Taktakishvili will present this week's Business Wire.
Gori Inn, a five-star hotel, was opened in the central Georgian city of Gori this week. According to Inn Group, management company of the hotel, more than 20 million lari was invested in the construction of the hotel, which was designed to contribute to the expansion of the city's tourism industry and strengthening of the economy. The facility features 120 rooms and employs 100 locals. Mariam Krivishvili, the Deputy Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development of Georgia, attended the opening of Gori Inn. She said modern facilities like the newly unveiled hotel will be an additional opportunity for both local and international visitors to travel and discover new sites. With the support of Enterprise Georgia, we opened a 120-room hotel in Gori, which will contribute to the development of the region's tourism industry and strengthening of the economy, Mariam Krivishvili said. Founded in 2015, Inn Group comprises 10 companies, including operators of hotels in Georgia's winter resorts of Pakuriani and Gudauri, the western hub city of Kutaisi and capital Tbilisi. Gaga Kokhreidze, director of Volvo Car Caucasus, says the company plans to open 2 new showrooms in Azerbaijan and Georgia in 2023, as well as bring new models of electric cars and increase sales. Last year, we have changed the dealer in Azerbaijan despite the high growth in sales, as we have more ambitious plans. We think Volvo can achieve better results this year. From 2023, we will introduce Volvo to our Azerbaijan customers in a completely different way. This year, we will also have a new showroom in Georgia, which construction is already in an active phase. It will be located in University Street, and we think that we will open it in the third quarter of the year. In general, our goal is to increase sales by 30%. However, we don't know even advance. Maybe this data will be much bigger, said Gaga Kokhreidze. The bags and accessories producing brand Cosmo doubled its production capacity and added new export markets in 2022. According to the founder of the company, Sophie Mukhlishvili, Cosmo had a very successful year. With the support of Enterprise Georgia, we were at the international exhibition in Milan, where we met potential customers, and after that, we sent our collection to Italy twice. We also opened our online store on Amazon and conducted various campaigns, said Sophie Mukhlishvili. According to the founder, Cosmo also faced challenges in 2022, which were related to the Russia-Ukraine war. As we focus on exports, we want to launch a modern, high-standard enterprise. This was our main goal last year, but the real estate price growth in the background of high migration to Georgia due to the Russia-Ukraine war prevented us from
doing this and made it practically impossible. Despite that, raw material prices will also increased. We tried our best to maintain the product cost. However, we do not yet know how much we will cope with this challenge in 2023, explains the founder of Cosmo. The company currently employs 54 people and has 7 branches across Tbilisi. Mariam Meliashvili, General Director of Toyota Center Tegeta, says 2022 was a very successful for Toyota Center Tegeta. Last year, the company sold about 1,400 cars and the number of customers in the service department reached 20,000. We finished 2022 with quite good indicators. In total, about 1,400 vehicles were sold, both new and used ones. We had an increase of 40%, which was quite a big step forward. As for the direction of auto service, we have to operate in a quite competitive environment. In terms of car sales, it's easy to convince the customer to buy Toyota. As for the service, here we focus on the comfort and high quality. Our insurance package, Toyota Kasko, works quite well. In terms of queue management, it's very important that we offer pre-registration. In the middle of the year, 50% of our customers who came to the service center were pre-registered. Today, this figure has increased to 50%, said Maria Meliashvili. She also touched upon the logistical difficulties created by the Russia-Ukraine war, as the delivery period has extended to 6-7 months instead of 4-5 months. As for the plans for 2023, the company wants to sell up to 500 used cars and bring new models. According to the director, one of the new models will be Toyota Corolla Cross. Last year, the quality and the volume of the hazelnut harvest decreased, which led to a drop in its price. Mahare Lemonjava, the founder of hazelnut exporting company Vaninați BMWG. According to him, demand for Georgian nuts from European countries declined as well. We mainly cooperate with the Italians and the company exported 440 tons, but demand is reduced. It resulted in a price drop. Currently, the price per kilogram ranges from 12 to 13 lari, said Mahare Lemonjava. The founder of Vaninați notes that until now the state has financed the nut business and says that he hopes it will continue in the future. Vaninați is one of the largest hazelnut exporting companies in Georgia, and in the past years it exported 900 tons of nuts. The company employs 30 people. A new blueberry producing company, Blueberry A, appeared on the market. The company's gardens cover 13 hectares in Ozurgeti and Chokhatauuri. The company will receive its first harvest in 2023. David Dobrotkinidze, co-founder of the company, told BMWG that plan to expand the gardens and build a cold storage farm. We expect the first harvest of 50 tons in 2023. The company makes focus on the exports. We are already working on this direction and we are at the stage of finalizing the negotiations. We plan to grow blueberry gardens on 7 hectares in addition. We are also going to set up a cold storage facility and gain a certificate, says David Dobrotkinidze. The founder of Blueberry A also talks about the challenges in the sector. As he explains, the shortage of personnel and heavy rainfall were the main problems faced by the companies in 2023. 2022 was a very bad year as we had heavy rains in western Georgia than usual. This prevented both the planting of new gardens as well as harvesting of products. There is a shortage of workforce in the sector. We are trying to automate the system so that we need a minimum number of workers. We are working on introducing modern technologies, he explains. Ukrainian restaurant Vyshyvanka was opened in Pekini Street in Tbilisi, which offers its guests modernized Ukrainian dishes and Georgian wine. As restaurant co-founder and chef Tsotne Maisuradze told BMWG, they decided to open an Ukrainian restaurant last November and launched it with a personal investment of 120,000 lari. Vyshyvanka is a casual name for the embroidered shirts in Ukrainian national costumes. We selected the name to express our solidarity with Ukraine. The number of guests is increasing day by day, and among the customers are both locals and tourists. Sotnima Isradze noted, adding that today guests mostly order Ukrainian traditional dishes: chicken kyiv, borscht, meat, and fish dumplings, although pancakes with caviar, garlic, avocado, and salmon. Ukrainian restaurant works with a full load and can host over 40 people at the same time. The facility creates 13 jobs.
This is all for today. Cannot wait for you to watch our exclusive interview with Michael Honigstein, political and economic chief at the U.S. Embassy in Tbilisi, Georgia. For more updates and analysis, please visit our websites bm.g and forbes.g. See you next Sunday. I'd like to start our conversation with the recent assessments of Fitch and Moody's for Georgia. Fitch said that this war in Ukraine played as a positive shock for Georgia's economy, and Moody's said that this war turned out to be a booster for Georgia's economy. It wasn't that visible when the war was starting. We remember how the government of Georgia projected that Georgia might lose $2 billion because of this war. What is the logic behind the developments for Georgia's economy?
Well, I wouldn't want to use the word positive because Russia's aggression in Ukraine has been so devastating and so cruel, and it has sent shocks throughout the entire world economy, including supply chains and availability of certain key items and food. It's also led to worldwide inflation that we've felt here in Georgia as well. But it has also led to a large influx of people and capital. There are 100,000 Russians here now, more than that, in fact. There's over 15,000 Russians have opened businesses. In addition, a lot of companies, because of its proximity to Russia and ease of doing business here, have moved, including a lot of U.S. companies have opened offices here. Since the start of the war, U.S. companies, tech companies like Lineate and Jetty Cloud and EPAM have started to hire more and more Georgian engineers and expand or establish footprints here. We are hearing more and more from investors all the time who are interested in this area. Cerberus, a U.S. company that does hydropower, has been here for a long time and is continuing to work. Plus, other companies interested in renewables are coming here. So it's really created a lot of opportunities, but this shouldn't be mistaken for sustainable growth. This is a short injection, and that's why if you look at the projections by the international financial institutions, while Georgia's had double-digit growth, it's actually gone down to single-digit growth, which is still growth, but that they're projecting for next year. But I think that there is some debate among economists about how long-lasting this is. And really what it comes down to is that this is an opportunity for Georgia. And it's really important what Georgia does with this opportunity. All of these companies coming here, all of these companies focusing on it, depending on their experiences and what they hear from the other companies that are here, that will really decide, show whether this is sort of long-term growth or short-term growth.
You mentioned a couple of
Yes.
things that I would like to dig deeper, but talking about the general context, we hear from the government still that Georgia is not going to set any sanctions, any independent sanctions, as they call, against Russia. But the question has never been whether Georgia should set sanctions, independent sanctions for Russia or not. The question is whether Georgia is integrated into the international sanctions. And we see some questions raising from very influential media outlets, including CNN, Amanpour, whether or not Georgia is part of the sanctions. What is your take and personal view on that?
Well, as you say, it was never a question about whether Georgia would have their own sanctions. I think that as a close partner and friend, the U.S. understands the situation that Georgia is in economically, although we have worked with Georgia for many years to make Georgia less dependent on the Russian economy. And so I think the issue is not whether Georgia has sanctions or not, but whether Georgia is becoming more dependent on Russia or less dependent on Russia. And the important trajectory is less dependent on Russia. In terms of international sanctions, we have no evidence of violations of sanctions in goods and trade, that there are things being smuggled across the border. However, when you talk about export controls, international sanctions, you have to understand that it happens all over the world. I can't say that there's no smuggling into the United States, obviously. And so it's what systems and what capacity do you have to deal with it, and are you taking it seriously? Are you taking the issue seriously? So we have a very long history of working with Georgian customs and Georgian revenue to help build their capacity for issues just like this, although the numbers are so high that it is honestly impossible to know everything that's going back and forth across the border, and what's sort of packed with other things. Because I'd also like to underscore that food and humanitarian items are not sanctioned, that we don't sanction those. So just because there's trade going across the border doesn't mean that there's sanctioned trade. But what Georgia has to do is Georgia has to take it seriously, and we're working with the Customs and the Revenue Service to help them do just that.
From this standpoint, would you say that the pandemic was a bigger hit on Georgia's economy than the war that we're currently facing?
Yeah, as it worked out, because Georgia's economy was and still is very heavily dependent on tourism. And so the ending of tourism was a tremendous hit on the economy. And one of the things that we're also trying to do, as much as we do support, and there are a lot of USAID and US government programs that continue to support tourism development, we also want to support Georgia's development to diversify its economy. You know, we do vocational programming so that people can get skills that they need that match the skills of what's needed to help lower unemployment. We work with the Georgian people to develop tech skills, like I mentioned, the companies coming from, the US companies coming into Georgia, and we try to help work that because we want a diversified economy. I should also say that as much as US companies here, we're also seeing more and more Georgian companies and Georgian innovation going to the United States. Georgian ferroalloys exports to the US, Rustavi Steel exports to the US, AeonRise assembles solar panels that are exported to the US, and an advanced medical device invented here in Georgia by Aptos is now being exported to the United States. So we're talking about high value exports, we're talking about working on our overall goal of further integrating Georgia into the European, US, Western, and world economy.
Is Georgia-US FTA still on the table in discussions? This is always a question.
I know, it's always
for
a
the
question
last,
that I get. So free trade agreements are done by the US Trade Representative, and they look at technical issues and do constant assessments. And the USTR is always engaged in what's happening in Georgia and learning about what's going on in Georgia, but I don't have any further news at this point.
And also one more information that we had, there might be direct flights between Georgia and the US. Can you update us on that as well, or is it also in the queue?
That's something that we've talked about for a long time, and we are actively talking with the Ministry of Economy about the steps that's required for that. The biggest thing that we need is an airline that wants to do the direct flights. There are other things that need to be done, checks with the airport and other technical issues, but that is something that I think we would all love to see.
Exactly. Also, let us talk a little bit later about the challenges that these changes on the geopolitical landscape has brought to Georgia. But first, let's talk about some of the opportunities. Do you think Georgia is ready to utilize the opportunities that are coming now with the actualization of Middle Corridor and the shift towards like more demand for Middle Corridor?
Yeah. Well, as you know, we've been working on developing the Middle Corridor and the potential of the Middle Corridor for a very long time. But yes, this war has really highlighted the opportunity, an unprecedented opportunity, that Georgia needs to take advantage of. There's a lot of plans. There's been a lot of discussions. It's time to move from plans to actions. We'd like to see Anaklia moving forward. But it's not just Anaklia, it is the entire line that we have to really look at. And we want to work with Georgia to look at what needs to be upgraded so that the entire Middle Corridor can be more efficient and more effective. We're also investing in the Middle Corridor in other areas. The U.S. International Development Finance Corporation invested $50 million in loans to a new Poti Port terminal that doubled its capacity, and that helps take advantage of the Middle Corridor. We also have been working with Tramo in Batumi, investing with them to help them build their capacity. So this is something that we have been working on for a long time, but I think the time is now to act quickly.
If we look at the inflows of FDI, and also if we look not only at the Anaklia project, which I remember Ms. Degnan once called a missed opportunity for Georgia, unfortunately, but we also see some large hydropower plants, for example, Nenskra, Khudoni, all the Namakhwani. Also, we see this very unfortunate trend of international arbitration courts and cases against Georgia's government. So what could be done in order to make this investment climate more appealing for FDI? Because FDI is not only money, right? It is also know-how, it's technologies, it's skills. It's much more than just money.
Absolutely, and you're correct on that. And I think that we want to see projects moving forward, the hydro dam projects that you mentioned as well. And let's see actual movement on that. We see a lot of plans, a lot of discussions about what to be done, but it's really, this is the window of opportunity that Georgia should go. And yeah, when investors look at the country and the questions to us and the questions to other businesses that work here is, what is it actually like working here? What are the experiences that people are having? So the very high ratings in the indexes get people's attention, but then they ask the people who are here. So it's ensuring that the companies that are working here have a good experience in the area. And of course, as we mentioned in our commercial report, also making sure that you have a judiciary that will make fair decisions for businesses, because no business wants to come and invest here and then end up being taken to court and then not having a fair shot at court or taking too long in court. So this is another area that we try to work with the Georgian people on, and the Georgian judiciary, which we also have a very close partnership with, helping them build the capacity to make sure that cases can be adjudicated quickly and fairly. And I think there needs to be more progress on that. Since
we're talking about the opportunity, let us in this part, and that's Black Sea cable project that's come to the surface. We know that the World Bank is helping Georgia to have this feasibility study and to see whether this is a bankable project. What's your take on that? And do you think Georgia should be more actively involved in leveraging this project?
I mean, when we talk about the Black Sea cable, when we talk about Anaklia, when we talk about the Middle Corridor development, what we're really talking about is we want to integrate Georgia more tightly into the world economy, and particularly into the European and US economies, and weave Georgia into that, because that's what brings the security and the prosperity for Georgia. And so The Black Sea cable is another opportunity. We want to see the feasibility study on it to see how much of an opportunity and what can be done there. But we also want to make sure that all of these projects are in a way that Georgia is not just a transit point, but Georgia is adding value, Georgia is contributing, Georgia is delivering on prosperity for its citizens. So, you mentioned the dams earlier. That's part of it. You have a cable, but you also want to have electricity to export. Azerbaijan wants to export through the cable, which I think is fantastic. It ties the region together, which is better for prosperity and for security. But we also want to make sure that Georgia is best poised to take advantage of any opportunities that would.
We both understand that both Anaklia project and the Black Sea cable project, these are quite large, geopolitically important projects as well. And the government hasn't been so far very good in explaining to its population why these projects matter so much for Georgia. But I also remember Ms. Degnan talking about the U.S. helping Georgia on some kind of investor screening mechanism. Could you please update us on that?
So that's another ongoing project that we are working with, and our Department of Commerce colleagues are here. It seems like every other month, working on developing the capacity, because investment screening is important. You want to make sure that you attract not just investors, but high quality investors, the kind of investors that transfer knowledge and technology, the kind of investors that make you more prosperous, that make you more secure, and so some form of investment screening will make sure that investment is controlled by Georgia and has maximum benefit for Georgia.
You mentioned earlier double-digit growth. What we see, and we all understand why these numbers are double digits, but what we see is that in surveys, polls, this growth still isn't inclusive.
I think that Georgia needs to be ready to take advantage of all of the opportunities that are being offered. The fact that there's big trade numbers with non-inclusive growth is not unique to Georgia in any way. This is a challenge that all the economies in the world are facing. And that's why when we work on developing the economy, we don't work on developing macroeconomic numbers or GDP growth. We really look at what's the impact to the Georgian people. Are we creating jobs? Are we helping the average Georgian have a better life? That's why USAID does so much work on high-value agriculture so that Georgian farmers can get more money for what they grow. We also want to make sure that it's growing in a way that makes Georgia more secure, and that means less dependent on Russia. So when we work on our energy projects, we're looking at how can we help Georgia diversify its energy so that it's less dependent. One project that I've actually worked very hard on is a wheat project that we're doing to help Georgian growers grow more wheat. Because right now, almost all of the wheat and wheat flour is imported from Russia. And I think that Georgians have worked with Russia long enough to know that if you rely on Russia for anything, they will use that against you. And so our hope is that by bringing in U.S. technologies and U.S. know-how, that we can help Georgian farmers produce enough wheat so that Georgia is less dependent. And so that's what we are looking at, the outcomes, and what are the outcomes for the Georgian people. We know how important wine is to Georgia, both economically and culturally. And so we have programs where we are helping wine growers better be prepared to go into the U.S. market. And now in 2022, it was over 1 million bottles in the U.S. Of Georgian wines, and I hope that grows. I'm looking forward to a day when I go back to my home and I can go to any wine store and share my Georgian experience with my friends through wine.
Thank you for these words. You mentioned that the focus needs to be on people and how we're helping these people, and that's exactly the million-dollar question here when it comes to the government. Because recently, what we see, the government government is definitely tilting into subsidies, price caps, and more also like employment programs by government. Do you think this is the right way to go, considering that Georgia is still not a high-income country?
I think you need a mix of programs, and what that balance is very complicated. So you can't just sit and sort of judge like that subsidy is good, this subsidy is bad. You need to look at the big picture and make sure that you're delivering real sustainable growth for your people. So sometimes subsidies are important. Are they a long-term solution? They aren't really. But how do you create the space to support people? And then sometimes that is subsidies. Job programs can be very good to help build skills. And we do a lot of work in the vocational field to match skills and opportunities to make sure that Georgians are better prepared and better educated. We also want to work to make sure that the best and brightest Georgians are staying here in Georgia. My experience in Georgia is that Georgians really like Georgia and they don't want to leave if they have the opportunities here. And so this goes to one of the reasons why we want to tie Georgia into the European economy and get Georgia into the EU, because why go to the EU when you can be in the EU?
That's all right. Looking at inflation as the main challenge for today, and we see that this was the first time when in the polls Georgians said that inflation is number one issue for them. Inflation has surpassed poverty and employment or unemployment as the main national issues. Do you think NBG has done enough to keep inflation close to the target, because target is 3%?
This is a very big challenge. It's one that our country is also struggling with, how to deal with inflation as both COVID and now the war has disrupted international supply chains. So it's very hard to say how to deal with it, what's the best way forward. I think the important thing is, again, to just focus on how, for the long term, do we build things? In terms of the National Bank of Georgia, they are an unheralded asset for Georgia. I know that all of the decisions aren't always popular, but Georgia has greatly benefited from their steady hand on the wheel through COVID and through now the war, resisting the temptation to deliver some short-term gains that would hurt Georgia in the long term. One of the reasons why the ratings stayed stable and they were so positive was because the international financial institutions have such faith in the National Bank of Georgia keeping a firm hand on the wheel. So is inflation much higher than target? Yes. Is that true in a lot of places in the world? Yes. But they've kept the reserves high. They've been very careful about making sure they can pay down debt when they have money. The lari is incredibly high against the dollar, even as the dollar is incredibly high against other currencies around the world. Obviously, that carries good and bad with it, like anything. But I would say that if you're going to start to look at why Georgia is actually in as solid a position as it is right now, you would have to put the National Bank of Georgia near the top of that.
On March the 2nd, NBG will have to have a new president, as you know. And you just mentioned the independence and the importance of independence of this institution, especially in light of 12 conditions that we have from the EU that deal mainly with checks and balances problem that Georgia unfortunately has at this point, and you already mentioned court system and judiciary system in Georgia and its challenges. What type of president should NBG have from your standpoint? And would it be wise to nominate someone who's like acting in government? right now? Would that undermine this independence type of issue?
I mean, you're right to raise the new president of the National Bank, because the whole world, at least the whole business world and the economic community, is going to be looking very carefully at that. Because even though Georgians may not realize it, I can tell you that businesses and banks and the national financial institutions do realize what asset the National Bank of Georgia has been through some very, very difficult financial times. And so whoever is appointed, people will look, are they independent? Are they going to be able to stand up to political pressures and pressures from the business community, who are also often looking for short-term gains, to make sure that Georgia's economy remains solid for the long term? Obviously, are they a professional? Do they have skills? Georgia has a lot of very strong economists who are independent and very experienced on the world stage. So there's plenty for Georgia to choose from. But the important thing is to have somebody who is unquestionably qualified and doesn't even have the appearance of political influence, so that Georgia can keep the same level of confidence that it has from.
Currently, Russia has become #1 market for Georgia for oil imports. And the reason for that was several, but the main reason that business and the government says is that because it is cheap. But on the other hand, we understand that Russia has really big problems of selling its oil. And that's part of the policy that the EU and the world and the West is taking against Russia. Sometimes it's not really nice to think that Georgia is playing like a lifeguard part for Russia in that. Do you see any steps coming from the Georgian government, talking to businesses, talking to society, how we can diversify from Russia? Because that's the policy that EU countries are taking right now, right? So you can find some other ways and not to be dependent on Russia. Do you see that urge?
We are talking with the government all the time about diversifying. I think that these large hydropower plants are a big part of that, and I think that it would be better if the people of Georgia understood that when they see a big dam that can be controversial, that what that large dam means is more independence from Russia and more economic prosperity. That is our what we think about every day is, how can we make Georgia more prosperous and more secure? How can we make the Georgian people more prosperous and more secure? And so diversifying away from energy dependence on Russia, which the entire world is working on now, is one way to do it. Georgia is blessed with natural resources across a wide area, including fantastic wine and grapes that we talked about before, and beautiful scenery, but also incredible renewable energy potential. And so Georgia can take advantage of the blessings that God has given it to become less dependent on Russia, and that's the direction that Georgia should move. And that's what we're trying to assist the Georgian people.
You mentioned Georgian wine, and very rightly so, because that was the one example where we actually saw that Georgia doesn't that much need a Russian market, because in 2006, when there was a Russian embargo, Georgian wine found new markets. It was Ukraine, it was EU because of the steps, it was China because of the steps of diversification. Why doesn't that example hold? I understand, of course, that this market, it's easy to reach, it needs less efforts for marketing, whatever, but it also is a political tool in the hands of Russia, and we've seen that
Yeah, the Russian market is what I refer to as a sugar high. I don't know if you have that in Georgian, where you eat all the candy bars and you have a lot of energy for a very short period of time, but it's not sustainable. And it's the same. It's easy, it's quick, but it is not for the long term. And so that's what we focus on with the U.S. government and our partnership, is that we focus on the long-term development for the Georgians, so that Georgia is safer and more prosperous in the future.
Should Georgia be so open for Russian migrants, for example, because we see these debates of, having some visa rules for them. Also, we heard what Lavrov said about Georgia's government, that it is doing a good job in, standing up to the Western pressure. We hear that from time to time that Georgia might get direct flights from Russia. What would be your position on that? Is it time to integrate with Russia more in this international context where black and white is very visible?
Yeah, Russia is there, and there's no ignoring that. But Georgia does need to and has had success moving away from Russia and diversifying away from Russia. There are ties between Georgia and Russia. There will always be ties between Georgia and Russia. But the idea is that at a time when the world is moving away from Russia, Georgia has to make sure it's not tying itself closer to Russia. And I will say that something like direct flights would be very problematic. There would be no way to do that without violating international sanctions. But also, it sends a signal to which direction you're going. Georgia, since it became independent in the 90s, has always had up to two paths, a Western path and a Northern path. And it's up to the Georgians to choose what path, but I've heard them say pretty clearly they want the Western path. But it's not easy. A friend of mine used a really good metaphor that I liked, that being this close to Russia, and Russia's so big, Russia is like a big current that's pulling you towards Russia and pulling you towards Russia. And Georgia's a little boat. So if Georgia is not full on the gas away from the current, if it's just a little on the gas towards the west or not actively moving towards the west, it's not standing still. It is being pulled towards Russia. There's no such thing as neutrality for Georgia, as Georgia's history has shown time and again and again and again. And so we want to help Georgia keep that gas on the boat, to keep moving away from Russia.
Do you see Georgia using these 12 conditions to have that gas?
Well, the 12 points that the EU raises, I think one thing to note is that these are not new things. These are things that the US, that the EU have been talking to Georgia for a long time. And Georgia has developed great relationships with organizations like OSCE and Venice Commission to help. And when we give these recommendations, what these recommendations are is learning from our experiences, our successes, our mistakes, and we want to share those experiences so that Georgia can learn from us, doesn't have to learn lessons the hard way. We've learned a lot of lessons the hard way. And so what we're saying is, these are the things that have made us more prosperous and more secure. And we believe that if you follow these recommendations, it'll make you more prosperous and more secure, and it will tie you closer to the international community, closer to the US, closer to Europe. I think one thing, when you're talking about Russia and the United States, when you're talking about the Northern Path and the Western Path, Russia wants its partners to be insecure, unstable. They want their partners to be poor so that they can manipulate them. They want their partners to be beholden to them. The United States, we want our partners strong. We want them safe. We want them secure so that we can work together. Russia wants its partners weak. The The United States wants its partners strong.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.